Have a great second hour here for you. I have on the line right now Nicole Brasseur. Good afternoon, Nicole.
Hey, good afternoon, Bob. Well, it's still morning now for you today.
Yes, another hour. So, the Supreme Court of Canada said, nope, we're not going to look at the Comer request to go to the Supreme Court and argue the case of the federal government not using the Bank of Canada, according to the Bank of Canada Act of 1938. And so the federal government they've chosen to spend money on interest to private banks when we never used to do that up until Pierre Elliott Trudeau switched all that around in 1974. We did not have a national debt to speak of at that point, even though we'd built schools, roads, got through the Second World War, and did a lot of development, including universities and hospitals, right? So we pay, at this point, $30 billion a year to interest for no damn good reason to private banks. And Justin Trudeau is talking about a new bank, infrastructure bank, where the corporate banks, the commercial banks, can truly bleed us to the bone. So Rocco Galati had a press conference this morning to explain his position on this at the present time. And Nicole, you heard that, so give us the skinny.
Yeah, basically what they were doing was, it's totally ludicrous to have, an infrastructure bank, but when we have the Bank of Canada. But what Rocco and Ann Emmett and them were addressing today were some of the questions by the people, who were watching the live streaming. And, in regards to what the Bank of Canada did, what's their next move, how they're going to go about this. But actually what happened was, the court here decision came out on May 5th, and it was to... basically, the federal court deemed that the case had to be dismissed because Comer was not an incorporated entity or a human being. So that was one of the considerations. And so anyways, Paul was letting me know that Comer's had a press conference today, and it said Supreme Court of Canada dismisses Constitutional Bank of Canada case, claiming it is a political matter. Now, even though this was discussed at the federal level by the the lawyer for the Bank of Canada, it wasn't really a statement determined by the courts. I haven't read that anywhere. And in the judgment that came out for Committee for Monetary and Economic Reform, Comer, William Krem, and Ann Emmett versus Her Majesty the Queen, Minister of Finance.
We lost you.
Canada.
Can you just repeat that last sentence after the Queen?
Okay, the Queen, where is she? Okay. Minister of Finance, Minister of National Revenue, Bank of Canada, and Attorney General of Canada.
Nice. Thank you.
So this is who they were suing, and it says the request for an oral hearing is dismissed. The application for leave to appeal from the judgment of the Federal Court of Appeal is dismissed with cost.
With cost,
so,
meaning Comer's got to pay for all this, right?
Yeah, and Ann Emmett and William Krem, yeah.
Wow, jeez.
So, basically what happened there is it says applicant statements of claims struck out without leave to amend pursuant to Section 221 of the Federal Court's rules. And their question was, is the right to seek justifiable declaratory constitutional relief, particularly in public interest litigation, irreconcilable with the pre-patriation notion of private reference or freestanding or advisory opinion? Is the right to seek declaratory constitutional relief in respect to the budgetary process and the legislative provisions of the Bank of Canada Act foreclosed by a successful underlying cause of action for damages tied to the declaratory relief? The applicant commenced an action against the respondents. They sought declarations of violations of the Bank of Canada Act. And then there's a whole bunch of information here. I'm going to skip right to that. It says, Part 1 of the Constitution Act 1982 being Schedule B of the Canada Act of 1982. And then they've got UK and a tortious conduct of conspiracy and misfeasance in public office. The applicants sought damages for the violations alleged. The respondents brought a motion to strike. The federal court prefatory struck out the original statement of claim in its entirety without leave to amend on the basis that the claim did not disclose a reasonable cause of action. On appeal from the prefatory's decision, the federal court judge agreed that the claim should be struck, but granted leave to amend the pleadings. The Federal Court of Appeal dismissed the appeal and cross-appeal from that decision. So a lot of back and forth here.
Mm-hmm.
So then it finally says the applicant filed an amended statement of claim where they abandoned prior charter claims and added a claim pursuant to Section 3 of the Charter, asserting a right to no taxation without representation. So the only thing they had to fall back on was this clause, especially for Ann Emmett and William Krem. The respondents again moved to have the statement of claim struck on the basis that the applicants failed to rectify any of the previous deficiencies in the pleadings, and that the claim therefore disclosed no reasonable cause of action. So then they appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, denied. You're not going to the Supreme Court.
But what is that part about rewriting the application? There, you made a line there 3 minutes
Well,
back.
that's because one of the facts that came out in court was the fact that Comer was not a registered corporation. It wasn't, a real entity. It's just a grassroots movement with no legal standing in court.
If they just became incorporated, would that change that?
Yeah, that would have changed. So this is what they could have. Well, this is what I assume they could have done was to actually incorporate and then bring that forward. I don't know what the judges would have said, but at least it gave them that chance to change some of their things.
Mm-hmm.
So, going back and forth for 5.5 years, this is a total waste of taxpayer money. When, first of all, if these were issues at the registrar, when you register a court case and you file a court case, it never should have been allowed to move forward.
I hear you. You almost get the feeling there was some entrapment here when you have to go through years and huge expenses, and then you get a one-line statement. Nope.
Yeah, it's totally ridiculous. All these judges, the lawyers, everybody involved in this case, the legal departments, the bar, the judges themselves, the lawyers, they should have known right away that, okay, this is going nowhere.
Yeah.
Why did it not get stopped right at the door?
Right. Well, misappropriation of public funds is really what we're talking about here. What possible benefit is $30 billion expenditure for interest when there are alternatives that would save $30 billion? So if you don't want to go to court, the Supreme Court, or you want to change some words to do that again, we should also have a directed lawsuit against Justin Trudeau for misappropriation of public funds to the tune presently of $30 billion a year, and will probably go up 4 times that with the infrastructure bank. Plus, with the infrastructure bullshit bank, we will also lose control of our assets like bridges and roads, probably hospitals as well, as we get these BS public partnership kleptomaniacs doing this kind of corporate sycophant type of policy and description and writing and the rest of it. There has to be accountability for that kind of misappropriation of public funds. $30 billion.
But Bob, this is what most people think, right? That we can go ahead and sue. Like some of the guys were talking back and forth in the chat. They're like asking, wanting to ask Rocco some questions, and which they never really got around to. But they're saying, well, are there any other lawsuits we could file? Well, the bottom line is this. You and I and nobody else, unless you get 51% of, if it's in federal court, you need 51% of the Canadian citizens now, according to them, through precedent, to be able to say that you can speak for them.
Right. That's almost That's a steep
we need 51% no matter what.
Yeah.
We can't, there's no case that will ever be won unless they want you to win it, to make you think you're winning something. I mean, the whole setup of it, when you go through these court cases and most people don't even look at appeals afterwards. And, most of the court cases are won in appeals or lost in appeals. So, what they actually say, during really doesn't matter. You have to look for the final appeal. So, like with what the Supreme Court did now with Comer, now that's it, But in reality, it's, if you're trying to sue them for something that we're claiming as Canadians, they're going to stick you under the charter, and you have to prove how it personally affects you. So they owe no fiduciary duty to us as individuals.
Well, I hear you, but here's a word that we haven't been throwing up on this discussion: accountability.
Mm-hmm.
They are not accountable to us.
There's no laws to make them accountable to us.
So what kind of a bloody democracy is this? It's not. It's not a democracy if we don't control it. It's a fake democracy. And when you talk about
dictatorship,
it's a dictatorship. It definitely is. Yeah. It's the legacy of colonialism here is what's going on. And we got to nail it back and toss it out the door. And whatever, I think this issue of signing the Citizens Convention of Consent, which I have signed, people, by the way. I mentioned it a month ago. And you don't have to thank me. I thank you for doing it and giving me the opportunity to help to free myself and my sisters and brothers in these territories. And so if that's what's required, because once you do that, all these things come into our jurisdiction then. Everything does. The RCMP with their missing murdered women's behavior and the inquiry involved with it, the Bank of Canada, the military bombing Libya back to the Stone Age, all this shit, frankly, would come under our control and not this pseudo-democracy that's a partyocracy that's built on corporate structured CEO style top to bottom demand instead of a circle of people coming to consensus, which is the direct democracy process. So this
the only one, sorry for cutting you in there.
No problem.
But the only ones who can bring a court case to court against the government is the government itself, and that's different levels, and depending on the jurisdiction. So let's say you have the NDP in Alberta. She would be able to file a case against the federal Liberals, okay? But she has never done that. So that's why I think there's no difference between the NDP, the Liberals, the Conservatives, the Greens, all these political parties. Once they get in there, they all toe the federal line. It doesn't matter what color they are, what name they're calling themselves. It's all the same controlled opposition. So when you're looking at this, you have to get the province of, let's say, Ontario's not going to sue the federal government, the Liberals, because they're Liberals. Right? Unless there's a little issue and they want to make it look like they're protecting the Ontario people. It's all a setup. And this is what we need to see through, is that, the province went after, the provincial Liberals went after the federal Liberals. Okay. They're all under the same corporation. So they're suing each other within the same corporation.
Yeah. So in British Columbia, we have now a coalition government. You've heard that. And it's still a party system, I know. As I've said before, we have to take small steps on a big meal like you're presenting with the IAQ's document of citizens' consent. That's a major head shaker for a lot of people, for them to consider jumping right in and taking the reins of control in this territory. And so, we get to a point where, as you mentioned, it has to be another level of government. So I'm asking you, is it possible the NDP of British Columbia can take the federal Liberals to court over Comer?
No.
Why not?
In BC?
Yes.
Well, no. It has to be the legislature.
Well, you're talking about provincial legislature, not the House of Commons. So it has to be the legislature. So the NDP Green Coalition finally see the light of day and say, you know, we can't do what has to be done in this country unless we get free of the corporate banks. And they say, they turn on the federal government and say, how come? How come you're making this needless cost to us of $30 billion and rising every year? It's not a one-off cost. So, like you said, the legislature can do it. What if the...
or they need the parliament, they need the majority of parliament to go after the government. But when you have a government that has majority, you can't, your hands are tied. So every which way we look at this, it ain't gonna happen. It's a whole setup. So unless we take matters into our own hands, we don't have, another 20 years to finally get a political party in there. Look at the Greens. How many years have they been in there? They got 1 seat. Then they get another few seats. And not even enough stay to make a huge difference anywhere.
Well,
so, I mean... setting up political parties is totally ridiculous under the manners that they're doing it now.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, I'm on board that we have to get out of the party system. I can see it's going to be a long process. I'm into it. I'm into it for however damn long it takes, because this is not working. We're becoming a pariah like the United States in the international scene. We can't even feed and give health care and education to our own First Nations citizens. Like, that's ridiculous. And then we heard in this one thing that on the issue of Jordan's law, that there's $380 million Philpott, the health minister federally, says is available. And then we're told that, hey, you know what? If they don't spend it in 1 year, it doesn't get rolled into the next. They cut it right out of the budget, out of the program for that. Like, this is willful incompetence, negligence, and dishonesty.
Yeah, and we have no power. And that's the reality of things. So I put in the question, to Rocco to answer eventually. Hopefully he will. But it's, we need to be able to do the Convention of Consent, which is a private contract between the citizens. And then I mentioned that because here they say the Supreme Court of Canada dismisses Constitutional Bank of Canada case, claiming it is a political matter. Okay, that I would say is not correct there. Per se, they didn't reject it because it's political. They didn't come out and say that. I haven't seen any documents to that effect anyways, especially not from the Supreme Court. However, it was mentioned, and everything indicates to what we've been saying, that we have to go after them on a corporate level, because one of the judges did say to, a new citizen that, if he didn't want to pledge allegiance to the Queen, the only thing he could do is disavow it afterwards. He has to say it first, then disavow if he wants to. But until we politically change these laws, they have to go through with them anyway. So we're living in la-la land through all of these old colonialist idealisms and laws, and we've evolved, to this level of democracy, which the two can't even meet. So until democratically, we vote, and we are the shareholders. But that's not, it's very. They play around with the words, and, you really got to hunt this down to be able to see clearly. So when you're looking at the fact that, yes, because we have a democracy, our democracy, and I explained that on the, in one of the chats there for this conference, that the Queen and the Governor General represent the people, and because we vote in a political party system, or in our political system that we have with political parties, that when we vote, we give away our proxy. We give all of our rights away to these politicians to make all final decisions over us. And this is what the people need to understand. Once you vote, you give away all those rights, because these politicians never ensured that they would create laws to protect us against their screw-ups. What they did is they protected themselves against us and left us with nothing other than a dictatorship at our very own hands. The only ones who can undo it and untie our hands, it's the people.
So we're still living in our colonial corporate structure, which never had any intention of being fair and equitable, that's based on a class structure and totally ignores First Nations, totally ignores the environment. These are foreign corporations for the most part. Any corporation has the personality of a psychopath because the law does not require them to be accountable for what are called negative externalities, the damage they do in the process of making a profit. Like, how can a person, a real person, get away with doing damage and not being punished for it? Corporations can, and they can write it all off with their lawyers. So
right. So basically, what I was trying to get to them is that, let them know, okay, well, if it's, now Commerce is finally seeing that it is a political matter, and I was able to sling in there, well, look at corporate law. We need to sue them under the Corporations Act, okay? So, but again, we need what? 51% of the population in a province to start launching a legal action like this from the provincial level to bring the feds into this.
Okay.
That would be feasible.
Okay, so let's go back a few questions there, because you kind of lit me up a wee bit there when you said 51% in a province. If we got 51% signatories to the consent document in this province, could we then have legal standing in the Supreme Court?
I think we would, even though they would say, well, you need to have the other 6 provinces along with you at a federal level. But at that level, I think that we'd be, this is my personal thought, that we'd be able to bring in a claim in regards to how the province is affected itself through the federal system.
Right.
Okay? Because the provinces get money from the Bank of Canada, or they can borrow from that. Sure. So that could be a question, and that brought in, but it has to be a premier that does it.
Okay, so the province collects taxes, and the feds collect taxes. So when some money comes to British Columbia, it's not a gift, right? It's come from taxes. So what percentage of that $30 billion is paid for by British Columbians, I wonder? I mean, that would be a sobering thought, because we just heard the health minister say $300 million, a big sum of money. We're talking $30 billion here.
You'd be able to go to StatsCan and see how much tax, or through the CAFR account of BC.
So then what you do is say to the feds, look, we want, if we've, had to pay so many thousands for this taxed or interest money from corporate banks, we want that money back from the Bank of Canada through the Bank of Canada Act. So it might only be like 800 million or a billion, probably more like 2 or 3 billion. But just to do that and demonstrate to the other provinces and to show them what is possible would start to melt the ice on this problem, because we're locked in except for the corporate approach, and the corporate approach requires the 51%, and we're not going to do that federally within a decade or two. And so much harm is going to be done by this process of borrowing from private banks. Because don't forget, people, the private banks have been caught colluding to set interest rates on the LIBOR scandal, the London Interbank overnight or whatever rate that they lend to each other. They colluded to set interest rates because now banks, or most banks, can invest their money in other areas. So what this means is they are now corporate financial institutions as well. This has to be addressed. It's going to harm us big time, and it's going to cripple us, actually.
Well, what people are not expecting is that international law now will supersede in our court cases. So if you're looking at the Comer case, 5.5 years of contentious litigation between the Committee on Monetary and Economic Reform and the Government of Canada, involving 3 separate federal court and 2 additional federal court of appeal hearings, resulting in contrary decisions on May 4th, okay? So if you look at all the time invested in this, how many court cases are these lawyers and these judges wasting our time and energy, sucking money out of everybody, the taxpayers, on claims that would not exist if we had direct democracy. If we could rein in our politicians and make sure that they don't screw up, or that they had a fine line to follow, because then they know they get reprimanded instead of having carte blanche to do whatever the hell they want, we would not have these problems, and we would not be paying all these taxes, and we'd have interest-free loans.
Not only that, we wouldn't.
It's our own money.
I know, but it's not just money. It's even bigger than that. Like I said at the outset, we led the bombing of Libya. That's the most immoral act my government has ever done. Now, we haven't proven that government agents are involved with the missing and murdered women issue of First Nations. So I know that might be sitting in the offing as well. But the fact that we have obviously led the bombing of Libya and destroyed the country and taken their bullion, billions of dollars Libya had, disappeared. That is an international war crime. And Harper and the MPs of that time who voted for that action should all be put on trial.
Well, the way I see it, Bob, is Canadians have two choices. Get thrown into a civil and world war, or stand up and start taking care of our shit.
Well, so we either fight a global war or we fight our own damn politicians. To me, it's quite simple who I want to fight.
Well, right now you've got, 335, or is it 365 now, parliamentarians.
I'm not sure.
These people are more powerful than the entirety of the Canadian military, because they're controlling 35 million people and enslaving us every day. 335 parliamentarians are holding us hostage. They are our jailers, because why? Of ignorance.
Well, I would say arrogance and greed is another two that go in with that. I don't think ignorance is an excuse for somebody at that level.
Well, a lot of them will say, we're in the mentality that, okay, repeat something long enough and eventually, you'll retain it. So everything is done, our schooling, everything is done on remembering and being able to, even though you don't know what the hell you're saying, as long as you can say it, oh, well, now you're intelligent, and you'll get a passing grade. And, or this is how we do things, without giving another thought of maybe there's another solution out there. Maybe this can be done faster another way. People are so lazy mentally that they can't even think for themselves, because they regurgitate everything that other people say without even giving it the thought.
Well, this is a big ticket item, though. I mean, it's really esoteric, I would say, oblique as well. It's not that clear that this is the route to take. And yet I have total confidence what you're saying is the route to take, because I've listened, we've talked hours, and, looking through the news items, I see that there are so many issues that we can't possibly deal with a corporate structured House of Commons on every bloody issue they pass on.
No, and that's why you look for the root cause. What is the root cause? Our political party system, our governing system.
It is. I mean, look what happened just recently with the vote this week in the House over changing the electoral system. Only 2 Liberal federal MPs crossed the floor on the vote and voted in favor of having a change of our electoral system. All the Liberals MPs lied with Justin Trudeau. They all lied together.
Well, they don't want it. So a lot has to do with ego and their, job creation. If you look at job creation, like what the heck? A lot of things are done because it's good for the economy. Whose economy? The corporation's economy. Not the employees, but the corporations themselves. This is, money in their pockets. Same with the politicians. Let's create all of these crazy laws so that we can justify why the hell we're getting this money. Once a law is put in place, it should be set in stone, in one sense, not stone, but set in a way that, it's got to be black and white.
Well, there should
so that it's, everything is understood. You can do this, but you can't do that, and that's why you can't do that.
And there should also be sanctions when you step outside those parameters, because that's part of the problem.
The only way that we can come back and get these people is to... we have no fiduciary. They have no fiduciary obligation to us, other than 51% rising in a province to at least start in that province and then make it flow through the rest of Canada. So this is a political matter, so the courts can't do anything about a political matter. And this is what the Comer case dismissal is all about, because now it's another proof that every time you bring the government to court on the issues that affect the whole of Canadians or the whole of a province, it is a political matter, especially when you're looking at our public assets.
So let me ask
the boss here. Well, who's the boss? Canadian citizens. Who's the boss? The people in the province. So they have to come together and make a decision on how they're going to do things.
Right. Now it's starting to look even
now,
more.
The boss is out to lunch, commandeered by a bunch of little puppets who are mini dictators and want to run things the way they want, and yet offer us nothing to other than cheap imitations of concern, and we're going to do this, and when we care about our citizens with this bullshit. I mean, history proves it over and over and over again.
Yeah. Well, take a breath.
I know, but it's so infuriating because we're wasting our time chasing our tails when there's one problem.
Yeah.
The shareholders, the ones in control, that should be in control of this country, and the provinces need to get their act together. The bosses need to show up to the office right now.
There's a
Otherwise, they're going to close us down.
Gotcha.
Permanently.
Foreclose us because we go bankrupt.
Yeah, they are interest. Foreclosing. Yeah.
Wild.
Oh. So now, like corporations and political parties can take over countries and people and run amok and do whatever the hell they want. We are in a dictatorship. They cannot deny that. We cannot deny that, and we need to act.
Well, otherwise it'll be like Greece in Canada and any other nation. We'll have to watch what goes on. Yeah, well, we'll watch what's going on in Europe because they're on the edge. Britain has an election on the 8th, just another 5 days away. I kind of snuck up on me. I didn't realize they'd called a snap election. And the public are not pleased. They're still showing the same emotion they showed during the Brexit vote. So there's a sea change out there, and you've had response on the document on consent. You've had response from Europe and other areas.
Yeah.
Lots of people are finding this situation is becoming untenable. And the issue with Comer also is getting picked up on some international stage as well. People are realizing we're getting screwed here, and we're going to continue to get screwed until we organize almost like a union of national independent people, international
exactly. So this is what the Convention of Consent does. It's our people's union in a contract to fix our governance.
It's a contract
it's
right, and it's a contract we make with each other. It's not with you.
Exactly.
It's not with any other corporate group. It's with each other as citizens jointly owning these territories.
Yeah, all we do is collect it, and then bring in the moratorium with, okay, this is what the people want. Here's a moratorium. You have to instill a moratorium because that's the voice of the people. Nothing in law supersedes the will of 51% of the people in a province and across the country.
Nice. Well, I'm glad I hooked up with you this morning and got you in here on this. I apologize for being on the 11th hour on that. It's a bit of a disjointed week for me. We'll set up another good show either next week or very, very soon. I have a feeling there's going to be elements taking place because of BC's position on energy that we'll probably want to talk again about who has authority to do what. In BC, the Supreme Court gave the Chilcotin the land claim that they had put forward for some time. And the past provincial government, the present provincial government, the BC Liberals, are not acknowledging that. And so the Chilcotin have to continue to use their short amount of cash and monies to defend themselves and their territories in court. Outfits like Taseko Mines are still trying to go into Testan Binney or Fish Lake to dump mine tailings in there when it's been shut down in the courts about 3 times already. So, these corporations don't give up. And if they have a complacent or compliant provincial government, like what we've been seeing.
It's just a matter of time before these international corporations, like the one suing Hydro One over our selling our own energy to ourselves and, causing them to, how did they call it? We're stopping them from making money in the province.
This is under a free trade agreement?
Yeah. For solar systems, energy. How do they call it? Not discrimination, but we're stopping them from being able to compete in Ontario because because the Ontario citizens own, Hydro One, and we resell the profit program to ourselves. So basically, we're not accepting other, they can't come in and give us a quote, let's say, and compete.
Yes.
Because we're reselling to ourselves. So anyways, this is a huge lawsuit. This is going to cost billions of dollars in the long run for globalization and all these lawsuits coming in. So people are not realizing this, and then they're wondering how come, their hydro bills quadrupled. Well, it's going to even get worse, according to the Auditor General for Ontario. So, we're just entering the huge battle here. But on a global scale, what's going to happen when the First Nations are, through the World Trade Organization, being sued by every Tom, Dick, and Harry across the world who wants to, say, well, we have the right to negotiate or we have the right to that land, and they're stopping us from going onto their lands, and now we're going to sue them.
Well, that can't continue. I think the obvious outcome of that works and is cheap is just to shut the borders down on these First Nations territories. If that's what they have to do in their minds, if that's the only way they can afford and be effective to protect their land and water, then I support them to do that. But again, they're afraid, right, that the government is going to penalize them and not give them the monies that the government owes them all the time. Well, that's an issue. I mean, we have, if we get this coalition off the ground nicely and it gets into power and works properly as they've said they will, then I think this government would be a lot more considerate to the First Nations in British Columbia anyway than the past. But again, I mean, history has proven that if the government, whether it's a coalition or not, these people are all in the same, I would put my hand in fire. I hear you.
These people are controlled opposition.
Yeah.
And if they give you something or they look like they're going to be nice to you, there's something going on in the back door. Okay, well, many of us, myself for sure, are going to be looking with a microscope at that process as it unfolds and all the details, because it's always in the details. Yeah, and you have to be. You have to be. And we'll see where it goes. I thank you very much. Hey, no problem. And be cool. Take care. We talk to you later. Will do. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Nicole Lebrasseur, and she's got her and her crew have the i-accused.com website, and also My Freedom 2017 on Facebook. You can sign the Citizens Consent form. As I say, I've signed it. I totally believe this is the only way we're going to get control of our country. We've never had a democracy to speak of. Now, I'm not going to get in the 35-minute Carnegie Council for Ethics and International Affairs this week, but I do have a 10-minute clip from the Real News Network on the June 8th election in Great Britain. And you want to hear this because the problems we're talking about right now are all over the developed world and the developing world. These problems aren't going to go away. These are governance problems at a time when we're knocking on the door of taking back our sovereignty, both nationally and personally. So here's a clip from the Real News Network with Sharmini Pires and Tom Barlow on the June 8th election coming up in Great Britain, because it is, as you will hear, quite related to a lot of what you just heard from Nicole and me.
It's the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Pires coming to you from Baltimore. Jeremy Corbyn and Theresa May were on British Sky News and Channel 4 for what may be the closest thing to a debate before the snap election that will take place on June 8th. Here are some of the exchanges from the live audience and the host of the BBC News Night show, Jeremy Paxman, and the candidates.
Now, you had a manifesto commitment which said there would be a cap on the cost of social care. Then your latest manifesto dropped that. And for clarification, the Health Secretary said there will be no cap. And 4 days later, you said there will be a cap.
We had... What Jeremy Hunt was talking about and what we referred to in our manifesto was the specific proposal. This proposal was put forward by Andrew Dilnot a few years ago when he was asked by government to look at the social care issue.
Why have you made it impossible for me to vote Labour in this election with your ruthless, short-sighted policies such as 26% corporation tax, the abolishment of zero-hour contracts, £10 an hour minimum wage, and now you want to put VAT on my children's school fees?
Corporation tax was 28% in 2010. This government has reduced it and proposes to reduce it further. We're going to put it back up to 26%. And why are we doing that? Because this country is badly divided between the richest and the poorest. You put corporate tax and tax at the top end down, the division gets greater. Are you happy that so many of our children are going to school with supersized classes? So many of our children are going to school hungry. Are you happy with so many people waiting for hospital operations, 1 million waiting for social care? You don't address these problems by ignoring them.
Can I ask you explicitly, unambiguously, what will the cap be?
Well, as I've just answered, I'm not going to give you a different answer from the one I've given Faisal. No, it's not about not knowing, Jeremy. It's about thinking what... It's about thinking,
don't know, do you?
It's about thinking what the right approach is to get to that figure.
But you don't know.
Joining us now to discuss the live non-debates of Jeremy Corbyn and Theresa May is Thomas Barlow. Thomas has worked as a community organizer and activist, and he's the senior editor and co-founder of the UK independent news outlet Real Media. Welcome back, Thomas.
Hello, good to be back.
So, Thomas, I understand that Theresa May had just refused to debate Corbyn face-to-face. So how did this type of questioning from the audience and being questioned by Paxman actually work out in terms of the viewers watching who are trying to make a decision?
Well, I'm not entirely sure whether it'll have impacted anything very much. You know, it was a mostly dry affair, even though the audience added a bit of flavour to it. I think, you know, Jeremy Corbyn's been campaigning for 2 years now and handled everything, you know, everything that was thrown at him really well. He's quite used to these questions now. And even though the media was kind of not doing its job by asking kind of ridiculous questions about Ireland and so forth, it's what people wanted to hear about. And he came back with very solid answers. He won't have probably convinced many new people, but there'll be a few people on the fence who are like, yeah, I understand he was interested in the peace process. You know, he's not like a supporter of the IRA or anything like that. He just was trying to help bring peace during 1996-97 to that area of the world and so forth, things like that. The only place really, Theresa May, you know, she slipped up, or well, she was put into a corner, and it will have changed some voters' minds, is where Jeremy Paxman pointed out that she's U-turned on a couple of policies very quickly, including one, a key campaign pledge in the manifesto. Within 3 days, she U-turned on it. She's U-turned on a couple of other things almost immediately. Her premiership has actually been very weak, very shaky in that regard, that she's not committed to go through things. And whilst some of us might like politicians who change their minds, what was pointed out is that if you're going to go into Brexit negotiations with a very hard line, a very tough position, and then turn around, people in Brussels are going to be looking at that and thinking, you know, you're a blowhard who changes your mind very quickly and collapses under pressure. And I think that was probably a reasonable point that's going to be made to a lot of people who have been looking at Theresa May as a strong, capable leader for the Brexit negotiations and thinking, actually, maybe she's not strong, maybe she's not capable at negotiating because she doesn't seem to have control over her own ideas or manifesto at this point. By the way, news just in, there is going to be a debate tonight. It was going to be with the minor parties only. Jeremy Corbyn has agreed to join in that debate and has challenged Theresa May to come on to live TV and debate him him. And now she's put in a difficult position where she's either going to U-turn again and look like someone who always changes her mind, or she's going to look like a coward who refuses to debate publicly the rest of the political establishment and political parties in this election. So she's been painted into a corner, and that's been quite a interesting and I think quite successful technique and tactic by Jeremy Corbyn in this late stage.
And what was the reaction of the British press for Monday's election? I know Corbyn's been getting a terrible rap on the part of the mainstream networks there. So how were these sessions taken up by the British press?
It gets to a point where what the British press says no longer is going to influence the undecided, because they have been so clearly against Jeremy Corbyn from the start, yet his popularity improves every time people hear policies and manifesto pledges, renationalising the railways, the energy sector. People ask, why does the French state own like a quarter of our energy, and it's making money for the French people, but we can't own it? These are things the Conservatives are never going to address. So the press reaction was largely, actually, half the papers, the Daily Mail, the Express, the Metro, they didn't even run front pages on it. It was largely of indifference. Some of them tried to make it seem like there was something interesting going on, that, Theresa May had reaffirmed her pledge to be strong on Europe, and so forth. But to be honest, it was pretty indifferent and confused at best, the media reaction. I don't think it will shape public opinion very much.
Thomas, you just mentioned that the smaller parties will be participating in the next debate with the other parties and Jeremy Corbyn, whether Theresa May attends or not. What is the significance of having these smaller parties, and why aren't they a part of the larger political arena in the UK?
It's been very interesting living in the UK over the past decade. Smaller parties have become significant, in the political landscape. The Liberal Democrats, for instance, actually got only 2% less votes than the Labour Party in the 2010 elections, despite only getting a third of the seats of the Labour Party, or even less. So the Liberal Democrats had a significant impact on the elections. UKIP have as well. They are all starting to fade, actually. Brexit for some reason, has taken us back to a two-party system. We do have an area-by-area voting, similar to the US congressional system. So it's not very easy for smaller parties to break through like it would be in proportional representation. But it's not just that. UKIP is under new leadership, chaotic leadership, which has the leader, Paul Nuttall, has been caught openly lying, not only about political things, but things like he was at the Hillsborough disaster and so forth. Now people have been mocking up pictures of him doing the moon landings. His lies have been so outrageous that he's sort of taking UKIP to a place where it is no longer politically relevant. The Greens have been doing a lot of deals with Labour at a local level and supporting Labour just this one time because of the danger that they see the Conservatives pose to the national politics. In the smaller nations, in Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland, national politics are still playing out as before. So there's Plaid Cymru, Sinn Féin, the Ulster Unionists and the SNP make up a significant part of the political discussion there, but they still make up a small proportion of the overall British population. And the Liberal Democrats have not only shot themselves in the foot by going into coalition with the Conservatives in 2010 and then U-turning on everything that they promised almost immediately with absolutely no regrets or no apologies. But then also coming into this election, they said, we are the party who is against Brexit, but also we will refuse to work with Labour in a coalition government. They've essentially committed themselves to only working with the Conservatives in a coalition government. So any progressive support that Liberal Democrats might have got, they've lost because they've committed to working only with Conservatives and not with Labour, who would be more natural progressive allies. So that's the state of the small parties in the UK. They did make up a very significant part of the UK discussion, but now their impact maybe is decreasing, and what we're seeing is a return to the old two-party politics of Labour versus Conservative.
All right. I thank you so much for joining us, Thomas, and let's do a part 2 on foreign policy.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us here on the Real News Network.
And that's the end of Altered Egos for this week only. I'll be back here next week. Thank you for listening, and have yourselves a great weekend. Look after each other and yourselves. Remember, resistance is creativity, and creativity is resistance.